In our ongoing series of webinars, we have a series of 5 coaching ones, and we're going to wrap this up today. And the idea here was to try to bring all of this together. So we've had a chance to look at coaching as a concept, some of the tools and details within it. And we're calling this one Coaching Up and Down because we're looking at how can we apply this both at a vertical level, going up to our sponsors, down to our team members, sideways to suppliers, so kind of a very holistic view. Okay, speaker volume is low, so thank you. I think that should be a little better, hopefully. Okay, so with no further ado, let's get started. Okay, logistics today. So myself, host, sound and technical issues. Thank you, Rajesh, for that feedback. And if you're having any issues, usually just give it a few moments to kind of let it settle in. As always, we record these, so if you do have any serious issues, you can always catch the recording. And talk a little bit about the tools in parking lot. You have an icon at the top, raise your hand. You can, do different things like speed up, slow down, that kind of thing. There's a chat box, which we have, and that's always available throughout the session, so you can always comment there and provide feedback. And as always, we accept applause. Our opening thought today is from Eleanor Roosevelt, and it's understanding is a two-way street. And I really struggled with today's opening thought because I was really looking for something that's going to epitomize what we're talking about today. And when I think about what we're going to be looking at and working with folks like sponsors and team members and suppliers and working at various levels, and I started by going down this path of saying, okay, we're going to deal with the problem sponsor. And my lovely wife made a fantastic comment. She says, well, how would you define problem? And they're being a problem to you, but they're not being a problem to themselves. So really thinking about that concept and putting it into a context. Are we understanding the other party's point of view and where they're coming from and what their issues and things are? And this is where coaching can really have a very powerful and impactful way. It can really help us to understand the other party so that we can work with them better as opposed to working in that more sort of adversarial model that we tend to fall into. So, we talk about the problem stakeholder. I put kind of problem in quotes there. Just to get us all grounded here, stakeholder is any person or group. They're impacted by the project or impacts the project. And of course, the latest definition includes those who perceive that they're impacted. But when we look at stakeholders, at the end of the day, we can kind of put them into two groups of either folks who support or detract from the project. So do we have folks who are helping us move forward? Or are they putting roadblocks in the way and they're really kind of causing that impedance? Okay. So when we look at that, all projects have stakeholders. Some are better than others. Some are, we have a good working relationship with. Some we don't. Some we struggle with, right? Okay. And the thing that we got to remember, though, is that we are half of that relationship. So we want to think about what are we doing? How are we impacting the relationship? And what are we bringing to the table? And again, I'm thinking in terms of our theme today, which is, how do we deal with those problem stakeholders? And we're looking at it from a, from a coaching perspective. And what is that going to look like? So I want to just pose our first question for today. How can we work better with stakeholders? So from your experience, how can we work better with stakeholders? Okay, we got multiple attendees typing, which is always good. Right out of the gate, Allison, try to understand their point of view. Absolutely, and that's an important theme for today. And we're going to leverage the Oscar model today, the coaching model, and see what tools we have to help with that. Solicit them for their expectations from L. Chadbourne. Hope I got your name right. Absolutely, because we need to, figure out what are their expectations and where are they at. And oftentimes those expectations, those motivations, so thank you, Linda, understand their motivation, can be at odds. So we have different stakeholders, different focus points, and looking at, what are their issues, problems, and how do we address them better. I love Lincoln's response here. Remain curious, listen to them. And thank you for the curious piece because we often talk about listening, right? So from Eleanor, listen to them, absolutely. Um, we do need to listen, but we need to remain curious so that when we're hearing the words, we're actually internalizing them and receiving them. From Julie, communicate early and often, absolutely. Um, much like our quote today, though, it is a two-way street. So communication is not telling them, communication is hearing from them. And I think we'll see that as we apply the coaching model a little bit later, that can really help us with the actually hearing them as we listen. Communicate early and often, engage them to determine expectations, absolutely. Try to listen, hearing their needs. Thank you, Kim, and I love that you said try to listen because, yeah, it is work and we've got to put some effort into this, absolutely. Rajesh, understanding the business needs. What is the value they are looking for from Judy? Yeah. We so often, get our perspective of value, but what are they looking for? From Valerie, allowing them to let us know when they should be engaged. What I mean is engage them, but then let them tell the right time to do so and not, if not when, absolutely. So that actually reminds me of an interesting story, Valerie. I was on a project years ago, and it was in the financial sector, and we were approaching year end. And if you've ever worked in the financial sector, year end is just a bit of a nightmare. So we're about 6 weeks out from year end, and we were trying to implement a new system in the audit division. Um, you know, don't bother talking to auditors a month before year end. And the project manager on this one wanted to run a beta pilot of the new application to get their feedback. He's kind of checking off the boxes of here's how I should run a project, right? And get feedback from the client and that sort of thing. And I tried to advise him. It's like, what? A month out, 6 weeks out, they're not even going to return your phone call, let alone have any time or bandwidth to be able to do any type of testing. And he beat his head against the wall for 6 weeks or so, and then in the debrief later, it was, oh yeah, I see what you're saying. We should have pushed that off. So really understanding what their world is like and what their availability is like, and those sorts of things. From Sarah, clear communications. From Don, frequent communications. Absolutely. So communication is definitely a high theme, as it should be, and we need to be able to do that. But again, it is a two-way street, and this whole understanding piece is a two-way street. So we've got to really, look at both sides of that. So our guest speaker today, we've got Catherine returning. So welcome, Catherine. And Catherine heads up our coaching practice here at TidalShift. So she's been very instrumental in helping us put together these series of 5 along with her other coaches. And we had Barb and Victoria join us for various ones. So thank you for joining us today, Catherine.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So as you've seen, we're talking a little bit about stakeholders, and since we have a relatively short amount of time together, I kind of boiled it down into 3 types of stakeholders. The first being the sponsor. They authorize the project, they approve the plan and any change requests, and they're also instrumental in removing those roadblocks. So as we're going down that path, we've got that issue. Now, sponsors typically are higher up the food chain. So these are, this is the influencing up scenario. Suppliers, they supply materials, products, that sort of thing. I kind of put them at a kind of peer level or similar level because although they are a supplier, we do get into a bit of a client-supplier relationship, but we're often dealing with them sort of more kind of like the peer level because we don't have direct reporting responsibility with them. And then, of course, we get into the team members, internal people who are doing work for us. They execute the plan. They does the work. So they get the job done. Now, if we're looking at a problem scenario here, the supplier, we've already got the advantage of the client-supplier relationship to leverage. The team members, We're typically dealing with people who have been assigned to us. The real challenge is those sponsors. So we're going to focus in on our sponsors today. And I thought to do this, I would introduce a persona for the sponsor. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with personas, a persona is a typical representation of what this person would be like. Okay, so I put together a quick persona here, and I'm just going to walk us through it real quick. So Ryan is 42 and he's an AVP. Now, when you do a persona, you want to put a face to that. You want to put a name to it. You want to make it really like it's a real person. But what you're trying to do is find sort of an aggregate or average of what this type of person or role would look like. So he's a BA working on his MBA, married, 2 kids. Has been in the firm for 7 years. Came from a competitor. Plans to climb the corporate ladder. Very driven. Works late most nights, and his reputation for turning troubled projects around. So, here we have that fairly typical mid to senior level executive, the AVP is working his way up, very driven, very focused. Your experience with Ryan. Now, I added this in because we want to really base this on what we see and hear so that we're creating an accurate picture. So here's my experience with Ryan. Talks and walks very quickly. Business-like, no small talk, get the job done. Meetings are fairly short with him, to the point. Very busy, hard to book time, right? As we often have with people, it's difficult to book time. Meetings are also short and to the point. So there's our view of Ryan. So I'm going to pop into our second question today and ask you, assuming you have worked with a Ryan in your life, what was your experience in working with this type of sponsor? Was it good? Was it bad? Did you enjoy that? Did you find it frustrating? What are some of the challenges that you had? And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of layer some of these into our conversation as we go. Exhausting. Oh, Valerie, that's brilliant. I love it. Because I had to chase them, right, and keep them on track. So, lots of I'm kind of reading into that a little bit, Valerie, around some distraction. Once a 30-second elevator speech. Had to come super prepared. Absolutely. Very good working with my Ryan. I enjoyed working with him. I enjoyed he was to the point and not too much communication. So it's interesting. We've got the same persona here, and we've got 2 people who found it exhausting and difficult, and other who's fantastic and great experience. And I'm really glad for that, because different people, we have different reactions and takes on them. And depending upon what our personality is and what their personality is, sometimes we get that to gel, and sometimes we don't. And the sound cut out from Valerie. Am I back? Let me just... I'll try cycling my microphone. Hopefully that brought it back. From Aurora, easy to deal with, decisive, knows what he wants, love it. Yeah. And when we can work with those type of people, it can be very generative and really good, right? I'm just going to check to see if my sound is back. Okay. Okay, so back to the comments. Sound is fine. Thanks, Allison. Good here, Julie. Great. Okay, back to the comments. I'm coming in fast and furious here. So very good working with my Ryan. It can be difficult to change their mind once they have formed a negative impression, right? So adjusting that, and that's why I put that bullet point around the reputation for turning around troubled projects, because sometimes these folks can get very, very focused, and it can be difficult to sway them. So that's going to definitely be a key piece within our within our coaching piece today. Consistent. They know what to expect and when to wait for responses. Focused on solving the immediate issues, long-term planning. More sensitive problems like HR, cultural issues fall by the wayside easily. Yeah, absolutely. And that can be challenging if we are definitely more of a people-focused type person versus a business-focused type person. Okay. From Judy, Ryan seems to be like a high D in disc. Oh, you caught me, Judy. Working with a high D, and I would adjust my communication style to match their needs. Bullet points, Good once I got on their level. And Judy, you're just giving us some dramatic foreshadowing here because it's exactly what we're looking for and looking to do here. Forces that you boil down information, forces you to boil down information to the facts relevant to the discussion required, absolutely. May not be willing to go deep into solving team problems. And love that last point there because our job as project managers is to do exactly that, is to go deep and solve those challenges, those deep problems, because that's really what we're here for. Okay, so just want to do a quick review of the Oscar model to get us back on track here. And Catherine, I'm going to invite you back into the room because I see that fortunately with our technology, when we switch the views there, our webcams drops off. So there we are back. Okay, so Catherine, just walk us through the Oscar model just to get us reoriented.
Mm-hmm. So thanks for that, David, and good setup for our coaching experience this afternoon. So most of you probably have been on the previous webinars, but just as a reminder, this is a great model because it's a way of following a process to step through for anybody that wants to use coaching as part of their management style. And so outcome is really the question about, what are we looking to try to achieve in having a coaching conversation? Once we have that established, then it's good for us to take some time and delve into the situation. So really get a better description of what's really happening, what's going on for you, what are the challenges you're facing. So we have a clear picture of the issues and challenges. Then we move into choices. And choices are about, first of all, what have you tried? And what are some possible choices? Again, when a coach is coaching someone, the intent is that you're thinking of the person as more than capable of coming up with the results. And you're there really to guide them and help them have a conversation around those choices. And then also talk about what are the consequences for each of those choices. So what are the upsides and what are the downsides of each of those choices so that we can, have a good, healthy discussion around alternatives and then come up with, the final maybe choice that we want to take and then say, okay, well, what are we going to do with that? What actions are we going to take to start to move forward on the choice that we've made so that we can make some change or make a shift? And then finally, the review piece around how do I know that you've actually done it? When are you going to come back and tell me? Did it actually impact or get the desired results? And if not, then what are some lessons you've learned and what do we do to move it forward? So that's really what it's all about. And when we're doing this session today, I'd like you to, really think about these elements of the model and hear and listen to what the conversation is as we move through this frame.
Fantastic, thank you.
Back to you, Dave.
Thank you. And one thing I just want to highlight with the Oscar model is really kind of full circle because we're not only leveraging it for that influencing conversation and sort of helping steer where we want to go, but we're actually taking action and then reviewing, did it work? And of course, based on that review, we're going to then decide, do we need to reassess and readdress and, did we get the desired outcome? And if we didn't, maybe we come back at it again and reevaluate what we wanted to do and how we're going to do that. And of course, our situation has now changed. Okay, so how are we going to work better with Ryan? Well, we're going to imply some Oscar, bring our friend Oscar in to give him a hand. So let's take a look at what we can do here when we apply the Oscar model with Ryan. Okay, so I'm going to play the role of the project manager who's having difficulty with Ryan. I'm talking to my coach, Catherine, today. And, we've planned a coaching call. So, Catherine, thank you for taking the time today.
Yeah, well, it's great to see you, David. Sorry.
So where are we going to start today, Catherine? Because I got this problem with my sponsor, Ryan, and I'm not sure what to do.
First of all, right. So, as we get started, David, I'm just wondering what is the outcome that you're looking for in our conversation in terms of what you want to achieve from having this discussion about your challenges with
Ryan's driving me nuts because, the project's kind of going off the rails a bit here. I'm feeling like he's not hearing me. and I'm just getting very frustrated with this whole situation. So I'm just really wondering what I can do today. Like to what can you provide me to help me work with him better? And I've got to get a message to him around how the project is doing, and I feel like he's not hearing me. So what can I better do to get through to him?
Mhm. So so if I hear you, then the outcome you're looking for is how you can achieve some ways or some techniques to help have a better conversation or make some break with your relationship with Ryan.
Absolutely. And it's frustrating because I feel like no matter what I do, it's just he's just running on to the next thing and just not even paying attention. Kind of feeling like I should just move on from this project.
So before we get into actually,
Sorry, you cut out for a
so
second.
I hear your frustration, and certainly I, David, I hear your frustration, and I get a sense of, that it's a big challenge for you. But really, before we delve into the situation a little bit more, what is it that you would like to walk away with from today's session that's going to work for you?
Okay. So I think if I can have some sort of action plan to address so that in my next meeting I've got a meeting with him coming up next week on Tuesday, and I'm dreading it. I'm frustrated with this project. Things are going off the rails. It's not something that normally happens with my projects. They usually go nice and smoothly, and I'm at a bit of a loss here, and I really think that Ryan's the whole problem. So what can I do to deal with this?
So I guess, right. So what you're looking for is some strategies or techniques. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, I think that might help. Yeah.
Okay, so how will you know that you've achieved, um, if we go through this and we come up with some strategies that you might use, how will you know that you've achieved it? What will be happening for you in your interaction with Ryan?
Well, I think if we've had some success, then I would be able to have a more two-way conversation because it feels very one-way, and I would feel like I'm able to actually get my message heard because, like I say, I'm feeling very much like he's forging ahead, and I'm just kind of basically on the wayside, just kind of doing whatever he says. Want it to be more of a, I've got some really good ideas and I know how we can get this project to completion well, but I just feel like there's no input and it's his way or the highway.
Hmm. So sounds like what you're trying to achieve through our conversation today is some way where you can create a two-way conversation where there's listening and conversation happening between the two of you. Does that make sense to you? Is that
Yeah,
what you're
I
looking
think
for?
that would actually be a really good outcome here. Okay, so I'm gonna pause the
Okay.
go ahead.
And so,
I
go
was just
ahead.
gonna say I wanted to just pause the conversation for a second here, and we'll step out of the role play for a second, and just wanted to comment on when we talk about that first item, um, it's really about and the thing that I love and when I work with, because I do have a coach that I work with, one of the things that I really love when we're working with a really good skilled coach like Catherine, um, you notice it sort of redirects it back around and it comes to a place where you've got something that's very actionable and something very good, like longer term, piece. Because of course I started out very much at a, grumble, 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 Ryan's a problem, and now we've got back to okay, well, let's build this to something that we can actually action on and that'll provide that better foundation. So thank you.
Right. And I think the other part of it, David, yeah, and I think that is the challenge when you're using this kind of model. It's so easy for us to have dropped down into situation, and we did a few times in the conversation, but I'm trying to draw you back up to the outcome because while you can describe the situation, unless we have clarity in terms of what you really want to achieve with Ryan, and then we have some clarity, then when we get into the talking about the situation, I'm going to probe based on those kinds of things that you've already raised and what you're trying to achieve
Excellent.
from the
Great.
outcome. So that's great. Good
Okay.
feedback.
So let's
Okay.
continue on to the situation.
So now that we, sure. So now that we understand that really what you're looking for as an outcome is to be able to create more of a two-way conversation with Ryan rather than what you've been experiencing up to now. So, just give me a little bit of a description of what you see as the top three
Okay,
challenges.
interesting. So the top three challenges. Um, I would have to say that the first one is just timing. Um, and by that, what I mean is that we're all running hard and fast. He's an AVP, and it's hard to get his time. So just even having the time to talk to him. We've been on this project for a few months now, and I think I've collectively had about 7.5 minutes interaction with him because it's always like bing, 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 quick, quick, quick. And I feel like we haven't had the time to really develop that relationship or even just be heard. And every time I try to book time with them, it's like no time here, no time here. And by the time I do finally get any kind of FaceTime or interaction, it's very much quick and I feel not really what's needed.
Mhm. Okay, so sounds like what's happening is there's a time issue. I hear in what you've described so far is that there's a challenge. You'd really like to develop a relationship with him more. I'm suspecting, David, that you're, if I recall, you're a high I, and it sounds like our Ryan that we've already had some previous conversation about is a D, and so there's a bit of a clash in terms of that. You're really craving that people piece, and he's not so much on
Yeah.
that page. And then I also just heard, that it's really a struggle for you to, have some time with him, even if it's just to talk about the challenges that you're facing. So who do you see is contributing to the problem?
I think a big contributor is just the environment. It's where I work is um, very high paced. It's in the financial sector and it's run 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 and it's all about producing those results and very monetarily based on the results. And feel sometimes that our looking at just how people are rewarded and people are acknowledged, and it's like if we kind of just forge ahead and get the project on time and on budget, but we need to look a little bit beyond that sometimes, I think. So
Hmm.
so I think that's a big part of it.
Right. And right, right. It sounds pretty important to
Hmm.
you and to the team, right?
Yeah.
Um, so what do you do now in the current situation? But when you are struggling to get his time and you really want
Um,
to develop a relationship to him, what are
I,
you
I,
doing
I
now in
kind
this
of do the
situation?
usual things where, reaching out through email and talk to his assistant to try and book time and, being flexible to try and wedge it in where we can. Um, and I always make sure that I respectful of his time and not ask for very much. So I try to keep my asks to a minimum so that I'm not impinging on his time and causing any troubles. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And what's working well out of all of those things that you've been
Well,
doing now?
it's to be frank, it's really not really working that well because what I end up getting is I get a 2 minute window here and a 5 minute window there, and it's always I feel like I'm kind of waiting, 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 and I make the request and sit for a month and of course things in the project are moving forward and they're now getting into problems because I need some direction and some assistance and meanwhile it's not happening, right?
Mhm. And what made you really feel that you needed to do something different? I hear that you've struggled and that sort of thing, but what's brought it
Well,
to a head
this
for you?
particular project is behind and over budget, and it's going off the rails to be frank, and the impression I'm getting from what I'm hearing from Ryan is it's fine and we're good and we're progressing forward. So it's really just it's not a good comfortable situation because what I'm seeing is we're headed towards disaster and I really need to raise those alarm bells. But like I say, I don't have that capability of or I feel like I don't have that capability of getting that message to him.
Mhm. David, what else about this situation would be important for us to, or for you to share with me before we figure out what we're going to possibly do with
I
the
think the other
challenge?
piece is having a bit more direction from Ryan as to how we want to work together, how he wants to work together, and kind of where we're going. Because the directions for this project have been very vague. It's like, here's a quick description of, go get this done, and kind of it feels very much leave me alone and run with it.
Hmm. So if I could just go back up to, your stated outcome, which was to create a two-way conversation
Hmm.
with Ryan. This little piece that you've just shared with me about the lack of direction sounds like it's fairly urgent because you've just told me also that the
Yeah,
project is double.
absolutely.
Have we still got the right outcome for what you're trying to achieve with this discussion around how you can
Well,
work
what
better with
what what do you
Ryan?
mean by that? Like, because you're thinking I need to focus on the
Well,
project?
I'm just wondering. Yeah, I'm just no. Well, I guess I hear that you want more of a
Hmm.
relationship, and you are actually really getting very little face time, and you've got some challenges, right, in terms of the project itself. You've just described to me that it's running behind, and now you feel that he may not be as aware. So, if we were looking at that two-way conversation, could we refine that a little bit, or are you still comfortable that that's really your ultimate goal, given what you've just shared with me about the
I'm
project?
thinking maybe we revise it to be more around getting the project back on track. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Well, you tell me. No, well, no, this is your outcome. You've got to live with this, not me. I'm just wanting to make sure that, maybe we refine this. It's a two-way conversation so that you can talk about where you need him to help you, for example. Is that a little bit more of a refinement around the
Sure.
outcome?
Yeah. So more of a two-way convo um, to fix the project, right? Because we need to get this done, and I mean that's a big.
Well, if that's the immediate piece, yeah, I think there's two pieces I'm hearing here. One is the short-term outcome because you've got this issue, with the projects behind you need some direction from him. But the longer term is you actually want to develop a more two-way conversation
Yeah,
relationship with him
absolutely.
ongoing.
Because we're
That
yeah, and
that makes
and
sense?
we are we do work together. We're in the same department. So I know although Ryan's just come into this department, I anticipate we're going to be working together on other projects in the future. So I'm also kind of thinking in terms of that longer term, um, you know, piece so
Right.
that we can, have a better working relationship going forward. And yeah, okay. So we
Okay.
got kind
So
of.
we've got some short-term immediate pieces and
Yeah, I
longer
like that.
term.
Okay, so I've just revised the outcome here. Okay, good.
And how comfortable are you with that as we've
I
been
think
discussing
that
this so
works because
far?
if we can establish that two-way conversation on the short term, get the project fixed, then we can use that as the basis for the relationship building longer term.
Okay. So given that we've only got maybe another
Mhm.
5, maybe tops 10 minutes to have this conversation, where would you like to focus your time on
Well,
based on those
let's
outputs?
tackle the choices and consequences piece because that'll lead to the actions. And of course, since we're kind of in this role play, and unless we
Okay.
actually went off and did that in this fictitious scenario,
Mhm.
then we would we can kind of park those a little bit. But let's talk about the choices and consequences and how using the coaching approach you can help
Okay.
me get to something that's going to be comfortable.
Right. So David, we've already talked about some of the things you've
Hmm.
already tried. What are some options that you think that you could consider in terms of how you might approach Ryan differently than what you've been doing up to now? Can you
Right. So
name
you're
some?
saying like, okay, so I've already tried doing um, one approach. So you're saying I should look at a different way of doing this. Is kind of the main piece.
What else comes to mind that
Well,
you could consider?
thinking about what I've done so far, where I've done the kind of the being highly respectful of his time, maybe I should be more demanding, right? And requiring that.
Okay, so more demanding might be a choice. Hmm.
Okay. Um,
Okay, so more
I've
demanding.
also been very
What else?
much looking for small, short snippets of time. So maybe that was a wrong approach. Maybe I should look for bigger blocks of time. So instead of trying to find the, the 5 minute, ten
Mm-hmm.
minute piece here and there, maybe I should be booking, the 1 hour, 2 hour, let's, sit down and work through this piece.
All right. Any other opportunities where you think you might be able to help resolve the situation?
Um, I guess the other kind of obvious one is to address the elephant. Um, I feel
Okay,
like I've sort of
could
just,
be.
um, he's come into the department. There was, the usual, if we talk Tuckman, there's the usual forming, storming, norming, performing piece where we, sort of got started and had some basic introductions, and then we hit the ground running. So, there is kind of that longer term piece that we've never actually sat down and said, let's talk about how we're going to function together as a team piece. We just kind of, hit the ground running because we're all, like I say, we're all going fast and furious here.
Mhm. Okay, so we have three choices or considerations here. One being that you might want to be a little bit more demanding and to get his time. The other one is to ask for bigger blocks of time. Right now, you've just been getting those short
Hmm.
snippets. And then, as you said, the other is to really address the bigger elephant in the room, which is, you know, getting to know each other on a different level so that you can have perhaps a more fulsome
Hmm.
relationship. So of those, what's the upside or on the one of demanding more time?
Um, well,
What's the
the
upside on that?
upside would be we get more time. I guess to not overstate the obvious. Um, so the up would be
Hmm.
more time, right? So we actually get more time. Um,
Right?
I'm gonna guess I'm
What's the
gonna guess you're
downside on
asked the
that?
down next, right? The down is it could be detrimental
Yeah.
that especially that word demanding, could damage the relationship and
Mm,
cause sort of a longer term um, issues. Yeah.
okay.
So
What about that longer block of time?
um,
Asking for longer blocks, time
I
blocks.
think so if we look at it in the same up and down perspective, like what's the upside, what's the downside? I think the upside would be that we do get more time um, with them. I
Right?
think the downside on that, I'm not really seeing any downs here, because I mean that's really the whole thing of what I'm needing as my outcome here is that I've increased the conversation. Um, it's I guess the only downside is be harder to get that time. Um, but I'm also
Okay.
thinking, as I think through this, harder to get. Sorry, I'm just making some notes here as we go. Um, I'm thinking the
Mm,
other side of that is the upside is more time, but it's going to be and for lack of a better term, I'm going to say quality time because we're actually having enough time to actually go through the
okay.
conversation. We talk about what we're doing today,
Mm,
and we're spending a chunk of time. It enables us to sort of have the conversation progress. I guess the downside here, thinking about the whole D of his personality, is that could stress the relationship as well a little bit.
mm. In what way do you think it would
Well,
stress it? Just
being a
curious.
D, they're typically very, short to the point, blah blah blah, and to actually, sit down and have that longer conversation could be, what I'm asking him to kind of move into my zone as opposed to I'm moving into his zone. But I guess I could always mitigate that with, yes, we're going to have a longer conversation that's going to get to that higher quality piece, but we keep it focused on the results as opposed to the relationship. So and just kind of allow that relationship to build on its own.
Yeah, yeah. I like you recognizing that. That sounds that you've really thought that
I
through a little
I've
bit
been
more
thinking
in
about
terms
this
of
a
how
lot.
that could be can start.
Sorry, not to
Clearly.
overplay my role here, but um,
Well, I think you've probably faced a Rhine in your
I
time more
have,
than once,
and
right?
I'm actually drawing this scenario from someone I
Mm,
did work with back in my financial institution days, um, and he's
perfect.
kind of my
Yeah, because it
yeah,
makes
well
it more
he's my
real.
example of the out in the corner D, and it was a great learning experience working with him. I'm just gonna note here, Allison chimed in. You would need to show that you value his time and you are using it wisely. So I'm gonna just pop that in there. Thank you, Allison. I think
Mhm.
that's a great comment. Um, this is your outcome. Love this piece, Catherine. Very skilled coaching. Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Sarah, for those nice comments. Um, this is
Yeah.
the kind
Yep.
of
Thank you very
coaching
much.
that collaborative, actionable, or sorry, accountable and actionable. Yes, that's what we were hoping for. Excellent. Woo! um, so I'm just gonna, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
so
Well, it's,
good.
that's why we bring the experts in the room, right?
So David, yeah. So I'm just gonna. I'm mindful of our
Hmm.
time. Um, do you want to, without us spending time on the address the
Yep.
elephant,
Let's stuff in
which
action.
one of these three do you think is the one that you want to focus on?
I'm gonna go with the longer time blocks. Um,
Okay. All right. So let's just see what are you going to do to make this start to happen then? What's your
excuse
strategy
me.
around that?
So action items. What am I gonna do? I think first is
Hmm.
talk with his assistant to see um, what sort of time blocks are available.
Hmm.
Having access
Okay.
to his assistant has been actually a bit of a godsend. um, and I can get a bit of the sort of inside track on that. Okay. Um,
Okay. So she'll be a great, that person would be a great support for you
Absolutely,
then.
yeah. So I think that would kind of be the first piece. Having gotten that,
Okay.
I'm thinking, as silly as it sounds, I think I need to make some requests, right? Request
Okay.
some meetings. Um, Now, in doing that, though, I also,
I'm
yeah,
good.
go ahead. I'm just think,
No, I was just going to say, thinking about your D personality, what else do you think will be really
well,
important if you're going to get that larger block of time?
that there's an outcome there, that there's going to be some, this is going to move things forward, right? So that we focus on the outcomes.
Okay.
Because of course they're going to want to see that, hey, this is actually worth my time and benefiting my time. I'm
Okay.
curious as to Allison's comment around
All right.
breakfast meetings. um, so if Allison can pop in and just expand on that a little bit would be fantastic. Um, the and the other thing I think is look at something that's more of a regular meeting so that it becomes predictable and um, um, something that can become a little bit more of a standard. Um, but I'm always hesitant to do that because, of course, we get into the, oh, well, we're meeting for an hour and there's nothing, so let's sit here for an hour and do nothing, or just have small chat. And of course, for a D, that's not going to
Right.
work. Um, so I think regular meetings with flexibility, so that it becomes, if we need them, we've got them, but
Mm-hmm.
we can always pop
Yep.
out. Okay, so Allison, think
Yes.
think outside the
So,
box. Meet him
mhm.
on his ground in the gym, etc. Show your willingness to be flexible. That's an interesting one. What are
Mhm.
your thoughts on that one, Catherine?
I think that's an interesting one. That's definitely thinking outside of the box. I also like Judy's because I think that's what I was trying to get to with my question about, thinking of the D. Um, he will probably want a clear agenda. You talked about it in terms of focusing on outcomes, which is another way of doing it. High D's, raising my hand on one of those. I love having an agenda. I love knowing what I'm going to be
Hmm.
talking about, and even in some cases, I love knowing how much time we're going to talk on each of
Hmm.
these items.
Absolutely.
So, just trying to get you to think a little bit about your person as well as what actions are you going to take to make sure you achieve success. So those are good other inputs. What other supports might you need to make this actually happen? You've talked about using his assistant. Is there any other supports that you might need?
See, and that's where the culture starts to step in because it's a very independent culture, and we're kind of,
Aha.
all doing our thing. And
Yes.
this is that very classically in the financial industry. It's if we're producing our results, we go forward, and some people do it more team based, some people do it a little bit more, individual based. Where we are in our area, it's very individual based. So yeah, that's I'm not sure who else. I guess I could look at other peers maybe, because there is another AVP that I've known for some time who um, seems to know Ryan fairly well. He worked with him in a previous department and things. So
Okay.
so maybe enlist the input, um, and it's Joan is the other AVP. So we'll put that in there. So I think I have some good items to tackle. Talk with the assistant, block those
All
times.
right.
Yeah, go ahead.
So on a,
Just
yep. No, no,
yeah,
just finished
just
reading those
just
off.
looking at
That's
our time
perfect.
here. So talk to
Yep.
the assistant regarding the time blocks and sort of get a feel for what that would look like. And actually set those requests up. Um, I'm gonna get some feedback before I decide on the regular meetings with flexibility piece. Just thinking about our clear agenda and clear outcomes and those sorts of things. So,
Yep.
talk to the assistant, talk to Joan
That's
a little
great.
bit, and see what that might look like, and find out maybe if I can get some insight as to what his preferences would be.
So on a scale of 1 to 10, David, how committed are you to taking this
Um,
action?
I'm gonna go with action in general. I'm a 10 because you know what, this is not sustainable, and we need to. This project's about to fail, so I got to fix this, right? I'm gonna just rate these here, and I'm gonna say talking to the assistant, that's a good easy one to do. So that's a nice easy one. Request some of the meetings again. Not feeling super comfortable with it, but it has to happen, right? So let's pop that in at a 10. Um, Regular meetings with Flex, defining the agenda. I'm kind of liking that idea, but I'm not committed to it just yet until I get some feedback. So I'm going to kind of put that at a 7.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. So what's stopping it from being a 9 or a 10 is, if I understand you correctly, is that you need that information
yeah,
from
so
Joan
it's
and
right
others.
now, it's an idea that we have come up with, and I'm thinking I'm probably best to get some clearer feedback before um, I fully commit to that. So that's a tentative 7. How's
Hmm.
that? Or I guess a tentative 9, current 7. Um, enlist
Yeah, just trying to make sure that you
Yep.
can move it to a 10.
Enlist the input of Joan. Joan's someone I can easily talk to. I've worked with her quite a bit in the past, and easy person to chat with. So that one's an easy one. And then I'm gonna put the include the time-based agenda. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna bump that one up to a 9 because I don't think we need to really get input on that one.
Okay, sounds good. So, um, how will you measure your success?
I think I'm going to measure my success on the success of the project because really, when I was looking at all of this, I'm saying, the whole issue here is that my project is causing is failing, and that's really where I need to make sure that we're doing, because that's my job. I'm a project manager here, and I got to get this job done. Um, and as we're talking, I'm thinking it doesn't really matter how I get the job done because, of course, I have my style that I would prefer. So if I was in, Ryan's position, I'd be operating a little bit differently. Um, but that doesn't matter because as long as I get the job done, that's really what we need to focus on.
Hmm.
So I'm going to go with measuring my success on, that we're able to get that clear direction and the project's able to move forward.
Okay. So, when will you and I get back together to review your progress?
Well, let's see. I've got that important thing next Tuesday that I mentioned earlier. I'm trying to remember what my scenario was. um, so why don't we touch?
You have to tell him about the
Yes,
meeting with
absolutely.
Ryan.
That's what it was. Thank you so much. All right. So yeah. So I got my meeting with him next Tuesday to tell him about how the project's running behind and over budget, and I need a little bit of time to talk with the assistant and to get input from Joan. And this week's been a bit nightmarish with the weather. Um, So I'm thinking, why don't we do 2 weeks from now? So we'll do 2 weeks Friday. So not next Friday, but a week Friday. And I
Right?
think I have a window at 11 o'clock if that works for you. Okay,
Perfect. Yep, it does. I'll just check it in my calendar right
fantastic.
now.
Thank you.
Thank you,
And
David.
thank
Good
you. And then, of
conversation.
course, stepping outside of the role play now, when we come back, we would go do that review in those 2 weeks. And an important piece
Mhm.
there is to put that
Exactly.
commitment in place now. So, and I'll just pop this in as a note in our piece to, book the review, so that it doesn't become
Hmm.
oh, we'll get to it. It becomes no, we are committing to that. And this is a part of the coaching culture that I really like, which is the whole we're going to commit to it and actually do things much more on a sort of schedule as opposed to on a just a when we get to it type thing. Okay. Now, we have a little tool for you, and we know how us PMs love our tools. And I practiced this beforehand, and it worked beautifully. And of course, now that I do it in real life, it didn't work quite as smoothly. So there we go. We have a coaching observation worksheet which outlines the model. So you've got a space for the outcome, the situation, the choices, the actions, and the review. And it's basically what we were just using. So where I had the one up on screen a few moments ago, um, this one, and we were filling it out. Um, this is an actual, a template for you to use. And I've just opened up a little box down the bottom here for files. If you click on it, the download will pop open, and you can download that. So one of our gifts today for attending this program to give you the template to help you work through that. I'm a huge fan of these types of tools
Mm.
because especially when you're new to this, it really helps you, bring a bit of that structure and make sure you've hit those important points. Okay. So, yep,
David, may I just hop in
please.
on this for a second? So I was just going to say, people that are on the call, the other way to use that observation sheet and just the work that we've been doing over the last 4 or 5 sessions is to do a self-coaching. So if you don't have a coach, or you want to just say, I've got this problem, how can I self-coach myself through it? And you use the model and the questions, what's going on for me, what do I want to achieve, all of those things that you've just heard David and I doing, then sometimes you can actually do a coaching of yourself, which can be very helpful in moments like when you're struggling with challenging
Excellent.
stakeholders.
No, that
Just
and
a
that
thought.
that's a really good thought because I'm fortunate that I've got a few good coaches in my life that I can draw on as needed. So I do actually employ a corporate coach. Now it is different than Catherine because Catherine and I work together. But I do draw on Catherine's resources and Barb's and Victoria's at times to get their perspective on things because it's always good to have that extra view. But there's times when you need to have that very third party different view. Um, my plan was to have one more question and have people, talk a little bit about what are some of the problems they've had with sponsors, suppliers, and team members, and then, reflect on how we can apply this. Just looking at the time, we're out of time, so I'm going to leave that as a takeaway for you to think about how you can apply this, and to just finish out. Um, Thinking about our opening thought here, and understanding is a two-way street. And as you saw with the coaching piece, a really good coach, what they're going to do is they're going to help us to understand not only our perspective but also the other party's perspective, so that we can kind of dig into that. And that's where even using this as a self tool also works. So again, thank you all for your time. Catherine, especially, thank you for your time today. It's been fabulous as always. Um, there is our code for the PDUs, of course, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Um, I haven't figured out what we're going to do for our next series, so I'm actually thinking I'm going to reach out to our community of attendees for this and see what you would like. We need to live what we do, which is understanding the other side. And of course, as always, my contact info is there. If you have any, if you need any support in these areas, or if you're looking for more information on any of this, please feel free to touch base with us at any time. So thanks so much, and hopefully you're enjoying this wonderful weather we're having this winter. And we'll see you next month.